Kelsey. This is my channel, The Fancy Hat Lady Reads. I'm wearing a fancy booktube hat, and today I'm doing a wrap-up video of the two readathons that I participated in earlier this month. I participated in Tome Topple, which took place over 2 weeks earlier in April, and within that readathon was contained a different week-long readathon, the Unicorn Readathon, which I also participated in. I read 2 books for each of these readathons, and they didn't overlap at all. The Tome Topple was focused on reading books over 500 pages, and the Unicorn Readathon was focused on reading books that had mythological creatures, either in the title, on the cover, or in the book. So first I'm going to talk about the 2 books I read for Tome Topple, and then I'll move on to the 2 books that I read for the Unicorn Readathon. The first thing I read was Warbreaker by Sanderson. This comes in at 652 pages if you exclude the extra bonus materials at the end. This was the first Sanderson book that I had ever read. It is a standalone, even though it may some point in the future receive a sequel. It's a standalone. And that's why I chose to start here with Sanderson instead of diving into one of his series. Obviously, these books are wildly popular, very hyped up on BookTube. Sanderson is a very popular fantasy author, so I went into this with a little bit of trepidation, like, am I gonna be on this bandwagon, or am I not gonna be on this bandwagon? And the overall verdict is, yeah, I'm on this bandwagon with some reservations. I enjoyed this book a lot, but it's not necessarily the type of fantasy that I want to be focusing on in my reading, even if it is something that I enjoy. So in Warbreaker we have 2 princesses who are sisters. Their names are Ciri and Vivenna. They are 2 of the 4 children of a king who is basically the king of a kingdom that is considered sort of a rebel holdout of a previous era. This royal family used to be the rulers of the much larger Hallandren, which is now ruled by a so-called god king. But now all they've got is a small, but nevertheless strategically important kingdom called Idris or Idris, I'm not sure how it's pronounced. At the beginning of the book, the older of the sisters, Vivenna, is meant to be sent to Hallandren to be the bride of the God King to fulfill a treaty that had been signed 20 years previously, but the king has a last-minute change of heart and he sends the younger sister Ciri instead. Both sisters are upset in their own ways because Vernon has been preparing for this destiny her entire life, and she feels sort of like it's been taken away from her and she doesn't know what to do with herself now, and Ciri is completely unprepared and has no idea what she's heading into. The character arcs of these 2 stories have a lot to do with Ciri realizing that, you know, she is actually capable of a lot of things that her sister might have actually been pretty bad at. And she has a pretty traditional, tropey, but nevertheless satisfying coming into her own storyline. And on the other hand, Vivenna decides that she's going to try to rescue her sister. She heads off on an adventure and discovers that for all of the preparations that she thinks she's had, she's not actually really ready to confront, you know, the realities of a lot of the social, political situations that she encounters. She has to realize how ideologically sheltered she really is, and it comes as quite a blow to her. Now, Sanderson is known for writing really complex technical magic systems, and this book focuses a lot on the religious beliefs and ideologies, conflicting ideologies that rise up to surround a given magic system. In this book, there's a sort of life force called a breath. Each person is born with one but can give it up, and if you acquire a lot of breaths, you acquire a lot of power that can be used to, say, awaken objects and give them a sort of artificial life. There's also this idea of the returned, who are people who, for whatever reason, are resurrected after they die with no memory of their previous lives. In Hallandren, they are worshipped as gods. In Idris, however, they believe in a more traditional, by our standards, idea of a god that you can't see, you can't touch, whose work is nevertheless evident in the fabric of reality. There's also a major culture clash. The Idrians are a more, I guess, puritanical culture. They have a very strict view on magic, the use of breath, and the ideas of color that go along with it. The Hallandren have a much more flashy society that's built upon the use of breath and the worship of the returned. And I go into so much detail because I feel like the book itself is structured to showcase all of this intricate world building, and the conflicts in the story are very much about pulling apart these characters' ideologies and in pitting them against each other. So this is an idea and magic system driven book, also a very plot driven book. It relies heavily on plot twists, especially in, I think, the latter half. The beginning felt a little gimmicky to me because I think the double sort of started off plot twists of sending Ciri instead of Vivenna for the marriage to the God King, and then Vivenna's decision to run off and try to fix the situation herself, both felt pretty contrived but necessary to get the plot started. There's also a pretty major plot twist that happens that allows for a romance to develop that otherwise I don't think, like, I couldn't have imagined how that romance would have been okay, except that there was a major plot twist thrown in. So a lot of intrigue, a lot of reversals. It's a page-turner. I've heard that some of Sanderson's other books are maybe a little denser to read than this one. I found the writing to be incredibly straightforward. There's nothing stylistically challenging about it. In terms of the characters, I was really invested in Ciri from the beginning, and not so much the other characters. I feel like as the story went along and the other characters' plot lines became more involved with hers, that's when I started to care more about the other characters' storylines. So I gave this 4 stars, and what I said at the beginning about enjoying it a lot but feeling like it's not really the type of fantasy that I am super excited about reading right now at this moment in my reading life. I was reading this and feeling like this is the sort of book that I would have absolutely loved, like, when I was in college. I feel like this sort of magic system heavy, plot twist driven fantasy was something that I would have, you know, been really into a few years ago. It's just maybe not so much where I am right now. I think I would have loved this book in college, but unfortunately when I was in college I did not have time to be reading 600-page fantasy tomes. So there's that. So I will be reading more Sanderson eventually because I do own a mass market set of the Mistborn trilogy. I don't know when I'll be reading them though. Honestly, the Sanderson books I'm really curious about are Alcatraz versus the Evil Librarians, his middle grade series, because those look funny and I've been really into middle grade lately, but I don't own those. So I'll have to make a call on whether or not I'll buy those or get them from the library or something. But for now, I'm really glad I've read some Sanderson so I sort of know what all the buzz is about. The other book I read for Tome Topple was Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. I find Leigh Bardugo's writing to be extremely accessible and quick, so this went really fast for me. This is the second book in the Six of Crows duology. This was also one of the read-along reads this month for the BookTube SFF Awards. I'll link that group below so you can check out the read-along discussions. I was participating in the discussion over there. In a lot of ways, this felt like just more like the first book. I enjoyed the first book. It's sort of action-packed caper shenanigans. I'll be doing a series review on these eventually. I'm behind on filming my series reviews, but I hope I'll be able to catch up on them soon. A couple things I enjoyed about this book. I enjoyed getting more from the character of Wylan. He didn't have any point of view chapters in the first book, and that was one of the things that frustrated me about that one. I enjoyed the continued broader exploration of the different nationalities and cultures and political schemes in this world. I felt like compared to the first book, this one had a bigger emotional payoff from having read the Grisha trilogy, which was Leigh Bardugo's earlier series that took place in this world. But you still don't need to read the Grisha trilogy to appreciate these books. But there is a little more presence of crossover characters in this one. And I felt like there were some thematic resonances here between this book and the Grisha trilogy that I didn't really pick up on the first book, specifically to do with religion, actually, so that's a theme with my Tome Topple books. But more on these whenever I get that series review filmed, so I'm gonna hold off for now and move on to my Unicorn Readathon books. This was also a 4-star read for me, just like the first book in the duology was. So my main read for the Unicorn Readathon was The Girl Who Soared Over Fairyland and Cut the Moon in Two by Catherynne and Valente. This is the third book in the Fairyland series, which is a middle grade series that is totally genius, that I absolutely adore. These books center around a girl named September from 1940s Omaha who makes several trips to Fairyland. On the cover we have the wyvern A through L, who is actually a wyverary, half wyvern, half library. He appears on all of the covers of these books, therefore qualifying them for the Unicorn Readathon because he is a magical creature. These books are absolutely full of magical creatures. If you pick any of them up, there's a dramatis personae in the front of them that tells you all of the crazy things you will encounter. So I'm not going to go through what all of the magical creatures in this book are, but there was a major plot arc to do with yetis in this one. The moon yetis of Fairyland. As the title implies, September returns to Fairyland in this book for a third time and ends up on an adventure to the moon of Fairyland. There she discovers that her friends have been waiting for her, and they may end up discovering some interesting things about what happened to the fairies along their journey to try and prevent the Yeti cider skin from tearing apart the moon. But any plot description is really not gonna tell you what these books are about. You kind of have to just read them and experience it on your own. But I think that this book in particular of the series is focused on themes of growing up. September is a teenager now, and it's sort of poking at this general theme from a lot of different angles in all of the sort of episodes that happen in this book. And one of the joys of this for me was sort of how many fantastical ways there can be to approach a theme. And I don't want to spoil any of these wonderful discoveries for you, but there's a passage that I really liked that I thought I would read. This is when September is on the moon of Fairyland and she looks into the sky and sees Fairyland from the moon. Many years later, folk whose names you and I studied in school went up to the roof of our world and looked down. Perhaps they could name the feeling for her. It's something like suddenly stepping out of your own skin and seeing yourself from the outside, seeing the body you live in the way it looks to the stars and the sun and the sky and everyone who knows you, without mirrors or photographs or reflections in shop windows. You look at that silly old place you've been walking around in and forgetting to brush your teeth or braid your hair neatly, and it is nothing like you thought, but somehow, some way, better than you ever hoped it could be. If you want to know a secret, and I do love to tell you secrets when no one else can hear, you cannot grow up at all until you have done it. Not if you are a little girl nor a whole species. Oh, I love it so much. So yes, I gave this book 5 stars. And then I did not have time to read a full adult-length second novel for the Unicorn Readathon, but I had enough time to read a very, very short book, so I picked up Dragonbreath by Ursula Vernon. This is the first in her kids series about Danny Dragonbreath, who's a little kid dragon who goes to a school for reptiles and amphibians where he's the only magical mythical creature. But poor Danny can't figure out how to breathe fire, and he's teased by the kids at school, and this is about him and his best friend Wendell, who is a nerdy iguana. One day, Danny flunks a homework assignment that was supposed to be a report on the ocean. He has one day to rewrite it. He drags Wendell along to visit his cousin, who is a sea serpent, and they go on an underwater adventure to learn about the ocean. This is told in sort of half graphic novel, half regular text format, so it's, I guess, easy reading if you have kids who are reluctant readers. And it's quite funny. Ursula Vernon has a sense of humor I really appreciate. And it's really fun to see in this book the sort of fusion of the mythical fantasy elements with some real-life ocean science trivia. So personally, this is nowhere nearly so much my thing as Vernon's adult work is, because I'm an adult and this is very clearly a kid's book. As opposed to something like this that is a kid's book but really has very universal appeal. I would recommend this for child readers. I'm not sure I would necessarily recommend it for adult readers unless you're particularly curious to see what Ursula Vernon writes for kids like I am. I'm planning to give these books to a kid in my family who I hope will like them, which is why I'm reading them. For Goodreads purposes, I gave this 3 stars. So there you have the 4 books I read for the 2 April readathons I participated in. Let me know if you participated in either of these readathons, what you read. Let me know if you've read any of these books, what you think. I hope you're having a nice day. That is all. Bye for now.